Bonsoir, je m'appelle Jan Geipel, responsable du département d'architecture d'intérieur. Je vous souhaite aussi, dans le nom de notre directeur Jean-Pierre Greff, très cordialement la bienvenue ici à la Head pour cette soirée et ce Talking Head. Par courtoisie, pour notre cher invité, je vais faire l'intro en anglais. Good evening and welcome. I'm Jan Geipel, Dean of the Department of Interior Architecture and Space Design. Welcome here at the Head to our latest and last Talking Head before the summer break. First of all, I think Peter later on, he will show a lot of pictures. Some of them are very, very small, so I think you have the possibility still to come closer. We are not biting, and it's reserved for you. It is my very great pleasure to introduce this evening's guest, Peter Ippolito. Some of my students, which are here, already met Peter during a workshop and regularly asked when he will be back. Today he is here. For the ones who didn't meet, some official curriculum facts. Peter is born 1967, studied architecture in Stuttgart and Chicago. During this period, he was an assistant to Ben Nicholson in Chicago. He gained professional experience in the studio of Daniel Libeskind in Berlin. Together with his former roommate and architect Gunter Fleitz, he then founded in 2002 the multidisciplinary and quickly internationally operating Ippolito Fleitz Group. In 2015, the two were the first German interior designers to be part of Interior Design magazine's prestigious Hall of Fame. Peter has held various teaching positions and is a demanded speaker and member of competition juries, also here in Geneva, for instance, for Foundation Hans Wilsdorf's Prix d'Excellence. The studio, with now over 60 employees and more than 25 of them being interior architects, now has satellites and local branches in Berlin, Zurich, Moscow, Seoul, and Shanghai. The portfolio is reaching from architecture, interior architecture, to product and communication design. It seems no matter the size of the project, the studio addresses the same degree of attention, the same holistic approach to each project. Among the clients, you find Samsung, Adidas, Walter Knoll, Aesop, Motel One, famous football clubs, Orange, Tom Taylor, Bayer Chemicals, Axor, Nikon, to name just a few. For a Chinese company, they work on the rollout of 100 new shops. Add to that a range of high-profile private clients which prefer to stay anonymous. I still hope we will be able to see a glimpse of what you do for them too. Sharing time here together, face-to-face, I think it is essential and relevant not only to present the projects, the results, but also the person and personality behind. Some of the frictions, if existing, also the eccentricities, which led to this career. To compare, a little more than a year ago, in context of the celebration of the diplomatic relationships between Switzerland and Japan, we had King Okuma here with us. We learned that he, for example, originally wanted to become a veterinarian. A few months later, we could follow the exciting narrations of a Japanese architectural studio with the name of a barking dog, Atelier Bovo. We also had with us Torafu architects from Tokyo and wondered because the receptionist is a hamster. Coincidence or not, these architects all share a sort of unconventional fetishist interest, in this case with animals. Obviously, architects need fetishes to inspire or reflect their creativity. I'm interested what Peter has to tell us in a few minutes. A few clues what I could find out for you. Persons around Peter, working with him, sharing time with him, sharing life with him, say, Peter loves big. Big things, big buildings, parks, and especially cities. Big sculptures, big art, both metaphorically and literally. In his own apartment, the first thing you face is a gigantic elongated bench from India. You wonder, how did this very beautiful object, firstly, travel all the way from India, and secondly, come into his apartment on the 4th floor. Peter loves to make big plans. I cite what they say. To have a big office with a lot of employees, to turn all his big ideas into reality. Big plans are one thing. Very big airplanes played an important role in one of your projects, the Palace of International Forums in Uzbekistan. We will see that project in a minute. Added to that, you also love to be every day of the week in another place, another city, preferably in another country, meeting with another great personality. What I am desperately looking for are some bizarre quirks or difficult character traits. Peter's office has, I have to disappoint, unlike Kuma, Bovo, Torah for architects, no fetish with animals, but he has confidence, a sound confidence and trust in the métier, into the profession, our profession. Instead of lamenting, complaining about the difficulties which the design profession actually faces, maybe always faced, instead of being preoccupied with conventions and limitations, it seems to me, you are supported and gifted by an infectious energy and talent to convince, only focused on creating and making it happen. So nothing wrong with his ambitions, visions, and self-confidence, all necessary basic ingredients to succeed. Then I found out, as high school student, you intended, correct me if I'm wrong, to go into politics. You even had the intention to become Federal Chancellor of Germany. In between, you followed a short career as a wine dealer. A little trip to Paris turned spontaneously into a one-year stay and life as a bohemian, living just a cliché under the roofs of Paris, working as an au pair, taking care of children, and selling tickets in a theater. I effortlessly can see Peter in each of these roles, from Chancellor, imagine Peter in the role of Angela Merkel, to wine trader, like a chameleon, changing with ease, dedication, and elegance from one role to the other. But then Paris, the city of love, inspired you to the passion towards your future profession. During a long walk through Paris, the idea came up to become architect. Peter still stayed until today that chameleon, now seamlessly combining and oscillating between architecture, interior, landscape, product, and communication design. His probably most important character trait as an architect and designer is his daring appetite and insatiable curiosity to embark on new adventures. And no fear for things and challenges which he never tried out or faced before, taking pleasure in finding the right quirks to come over eventual difficulties and limitations with clients, places, bureaucracy. Peter keeps and cultivates also a love to gastronomy. Himself being a passionate cook at home, he seems to master the perfect mise en place also in the office, with a pronounced sense of finding and mixing the right people, talents, and disciplines for each project. Do I need to mention that it drives him crazy if young people are not hungry, having no curiosity to find out, question, discover, do? We shortly talked about Japan. Entering houses, shops, offices, you often pass by a little shrine, which should bring you luck. Strolling through Peter's office, there is no shrine, but a sort of replacement. On a wall, you pass an impressive artistic patchwork of frames. Looking a little closer, you realize that's not an artwork, but a collage of the over 200 important design prizes the office did win over the last decade. We all know success is 10% talent and vision and 90% sweat and tears. We all know the pictures of deadly, seriously looking architects. Obviously, many architects feel the need to underline their professionalism by presenting themselves in that way. Look at the image. I have the impression Peter is taking extremely pleasure in what he is doing. Alan Key, a prominent computer scientist, says the best method to predict the future is to create it. So if I translate it into our field, I think we shouldn't ask or wait what the future will be. We should ask how we can shape the future that we want for us, for our spaces, our cities and societies. What are the spaces and the interiors of tomorrow we would like to propose, to live in, to use, to share? The reason why I invited Peter today is that his projects give an excellent and thrilling outlook in the immense possibilities and potentials of making, creating, inventing spaces, especially when skillfully combined with other disciplines into a holistic amalgam, into a total and enriching perception and experience. All that based on the understanding that architecture can do, make, enhance, and make the difference. Or in the words of your studio, we architect your identity. Thanks, dear Peter, to follow our invitation to be with us tonight, and welcome.
Thank you so much. I think I have to have a serious word with a couple of people back home, right? Okay, well, thanks for having me here. It's a real pleasure coming back to Geneva. Okay, I'm going to show you a little journey through what our studio is up to. If you read underneath our name, Ippolito Fleitz Group, there's written Identity Architects. As Jan said, when we founded the studio, which is actually 18 years ago, we felt, both coming from architecture, that it would be too limited for us to only look from the perspective as an architect to the task of our clients. We were always kind of curious to include more perspectives into our work. I did that already in my studies. I worked for my first year, basically, with literature students and study mates from medicine and art and whatever. And so I always was interested in having a multi-perspective solutions and designs going on. So we started that studio with the idea of combining different disciplines, not being specialized in only one discipline, one genre, one category of work. I never wanted to be in a situation that I'm going to end up like in my age and having built the 50th villa or something in the surrounding of Stuttgart. So that's where we are still today. So we have a team of almost 70 people coming from 4 disciplines: architecture, interior architecture, product design, and communications design, with a very deliberate, broad portfolio dealing with identity. Which means that we're not having a signature style as a studio. If you look at our projects, you'll see that they are very different. They're different because our clients are very different. They're coming from different backgrounds and different cultures with different histories. They have different goals. They have different personalities. They have different clients. And so all of our projects are really very different. And we love that. We love having a portfolio on every day which informs each other, and which goes literally from very small to very, very huge. Our smallest project today probably would be like the hinge of some spectacles, or in architecture or in interior would be like a 12 square meter kiosk for pretzels, the largest being like a almost 40,000 square meter headquarters, and everything in between. And our projects work from no budget to no budget and everything in between, and we love that too. We don't want to be specialized, and we feel in a society where more and more boundaries are melting, things are informing each other in a very intricate way, so we learn every day. The beauty of this is that every day we're learning a new business model, a new life model, a new idea, and all these things inform each other, and that's just wonderful. As Jan said, curiosity is really at the core of what we do. We're really hungry for new projects, and the best project for us is always the project we never did before in a country we haven't been before. We just love that. We love that energy of just conquering something new. So let's begin that little journey of projects. So working with identity is an interesting task because identity is nothing stable, of course, but architecture is much more stable than identity. Identity is always a mixture between self-reflection and your image of yourself and the image somebody else has on you. So it's always about a balance, a very fine balance to kind of match these two perspectives on yourself or on the task you're up to. Let's start with something more like easy. Office spaces, workspaces. In a world in which a lot of office towers look all the same, like in Frankfurt, they have like a Berlin wave of architecture coming up, and all these buildings looking pretty much the same. People getting more and more nervous because they don't recognize the buildings anymore. So the lobby becomes a business card, basically, for the whole building. And that's something which we see in our work quite a bit, that our part of a project, which usually comes at a very late point, the interior part, somehow often has the chance to become the key point for the identity of the whole project. And we, as a role of being in a dialogue with our clients, who eventually talks about the usage of the building, are very often in the situation that we're getting a lot of trust very, very, very quickly with our clients, because we actually care about all these different things, which at the end the client needs to face if he's going to use the building. So here we're looking at a lobby in a tower in Frankfurt. It's actually a very tiny space. It's like not even a third of this room. And like at a fair stand, you need to manage passing by that tower to get an idea of the identity of the building, to stick out, to grab attention, and at the same time, of course, have a consistent story from inside to outside about what the building is about. So here we're looking at the ceiling. That small space becomes like a really dynamic gesture, lifting up to the ceiling with an undulated surface, a wide surface, which has like a playful back and forth of wide fins, and which ends up in that folded ceiling, which mirrors the space and makes it even higher. So there's a dramatization of that little tiny space, sculptural furniture, and what happens is it becomes like in this natural stone, typical Frankfurt building, it becomes really like a highlight. If you pass by, suddenly pops something up and you be pulled in, and then the story continues to the core. You'll see that a little bit here, which continues with the same structure but becomes very warm and very cozy, and it promises a very high-end experience, which is basically pretty much the most prestigious tower right now in Frankfurt. Now, what you don't see in a lot of our projects, now in none of our projects, is technology. We don't show MEP or HVAC unless we do want you to see that. So a space like this, which looks actually pretty cold and cool, has a built-in kind of contradiction, because once you enter it, it becomes very warm and cozy and very, very committing. So we have put a lot of acoustics in here, but you don't see it. So between all these fins, there's acoustic absorbing material. So you have the contradiction of having actually a very representative cool space, but you're coming in and you're feeling already welcomed with acoustics. Acoustics are very important for our well-being in space. Actually, it's the most important parameter for feeling well or welcome in a space. So we take a lot of care in that. Well, it all in our work has to do with trust, like for every designer. Without the trust of our clients, there wouldn't be any interesting result. And of course, in a very accelerated business, and our business is extremely accelerated, we need to gain that trust on the spot. Compared to a classic architect, our business is totally crazy in terms of speed. Most of our projects today come with a 2-liner email, like you up for something, and that could be like a little tiny project, and that could be like a huge project, and 90% of the projects coming to our studio, you'll meet the guy 3 days later, you make a contract, 2 weeks later you have to make a presentation, 6 weeks later you start building. Most projects are not longer than 6 months, no matter how big they are. Basically, everybody comes too late. Big corporations, classic entrepreneur, private people, they all come too late. They all forget about interiors until they have signed their contract. So you have a very, very, very limited piece of time to actually understand what the whole thing is about, understand the whole background of your client, the psychology, the desires, the hopes, the business model, and to establish trust, so you can go with the client in a dialogue to actually listen, forget what he brought you, but understand it, and then do something new, because that's what a good project is about. It's about forgetting what they bring, but understanding where they want to go, and then coming up with a project where at the end, when it's successful, they say, I'd never thought of that, but I always wanted that. And then it's a good project, you know? So we're looking out for this mechanism. Now, being credible starts, of course, with our own space. And so this is a view in our own studio, which we're working at since 8 years now, which was a major step in our career to actually take the courage to say, well, let's get rid of all this kind of informal, you know, how an architectural studio usually looks like, and let's do it right. Let's do it as if we would be our own clients, and let's make a studio we are proud of, we love to work at, which makes us happy to be there, and at the same time convinces our clients immediately that we are the right ones because we mean it and they'll feel that we mean it. So that's our studio in Stuttgart, the main studio. And you'll see it's all about communication. It's a big space, 4-meter height ceiling, everybody talks to it, everybody. We have a very high frequency of projects. Right now, we probably work on 60 to 70 projects at the time. We're doing like about 180 projects a year, so you can imagine how fast the frequency is in all different sizes, in all different cultures. So people need to talk about with each other very quickly, so we need that open structure. Actually, there's no closed office in our studio. Gunter and myself, we're sitting here. Everybody knows everything, it's very transparent. We do a lot of workspace. Workspace is a very interesting part of our portfolio right now because it's a lot of things moving. The way we work changes completely. It changed because we work mobile. We don't need the big desk anymore. 10 years ago, we designed workspace around desks organization. Today, we're designing a landscape of knowledge, of communication, of learning, of meeting each other, trying to create moments where inspiration and where innovation can happen. An office like ours is very much like that. It's about enabling situations. You'll find a lot of different communication zones. Of course, standing is always the quickest kind of meeting you could have, so you'll find a lot of meeting situations. You have workbenches which are rather tight and they're very compact because it's all about exchanging ideas very quickly. We don't use paper anymore or very little in the office. These ribbons you'll see, we had access to our old textile archive of the 1950s, so they are like light switches for the personal desk light. We have informal meeting places in the studio, so you can sit down. It's nice to sit down, but they're so uncomfortable that you get up quickly again, Not kidding, that's a very interesting mechanism. You all have to consider all these things. And you'll see a lot of acoustics, of course, because 30 people in a space making a lot of noise. So we need to have a very good acoustic, and that's the most beautiful thing in our studio. You walk through it and it's so relaxing, although the whole place is really vibrating. So an official meeting place, of course, small meeting place, one is bright, one is dark. So what we're doing is we'll create situations which serve differentiated purposes. So whenever you have a different group, whatever you want to do, you choose your space accordingly. And of course, if you're sitting as dense as we do in our workshop, then you have to give space on the other hand. You can't just compress it. That's something a lot of companies doing wrong. So this is our salon. This is where we cook, where we eat, where we have weekly show fix with all members of the team. There's our library. There's another communication tool like an alcove. There's where we put out all the materials. It's never that clean, right? When we show our clients our materials. Okay. So workplace is interesting because we work differently, and of course it's interesting because we all look for good people. So that's like the famous war of talent. So it's a lot about identity too. The way we work today is about how do I represent myself to my staff, to my team inside, as well as, of course, to my clients outside. And all these things, like everything in our world, becomes more and more branded and becomes more and more conscious about having the right image of your personality, displaying your attitude towards things. This is the headquarters of Schleich Bergermann and Partner, which is one of the most famous structural engineers in Germany. Schleich Senior was one of the engineers who actually did the roof of the Olympia Stadium in Munich with Benisch. And they have a classic situation, 5 offices in Stuttgart, beside 5 offices in the world, which kind of they grew and grew and grew, and they wanted to bring that all back to one energy so people actually start communicating cross categories. So the structural engineers can talk to the solar engineers and enhance the communication as well as the corporate spirit. And at the same time, since they have offices in Rio and New York and Berlin or whatever, to create a hub for like a gravity for all their enterprises. Now, how does a structural engineer look like? You know, of course, it has something to do with precision and with mathematics and with structural thinking. But at the same time, they're very unconventional in their solutions. So we were looking for a new way of interpreting that. That's a view from outside, and you already see these big plus-like columns and suspended cabinets, which make a very characteristic way outside. Now, if you do workspace, it's all about people, again, like everything we do. It's always about people. So you can do everything right, you can make it nice and functional and everything, but at the same time you do everything wrong if you don't work with the people. The change management of a project like that is like the most important thing you need to do. So you need to be very careful, because people, if they need to change their situation, so engineers who were sitting 20 year long in an old landmark building with 4-meter high ceiling, like a Beaux-Arts building, now to tell them, we're going to move, it's going to be wonderful, you're going to sit in the open, beautiful communication possibilities, ceiling's going to be 248, it's not going to work. It's going to be the result, but the process is very interesting. So we have to take care of all these fears, concerns, because they're there, and you can't just neglect them. And you can't just avoid them by just saying it's so beautiful. You have to work with that. So, what did we do? First, the entrance. As like in the project in Frankfurt, we create a business card, like an iconic business card for what they do. So this is like the entrance to their offices from the ground floor. They designed, of course, themselves a staircase, which kind of expresses what Schleichbergermann is about, which is about lightweight engineering. Actually, the staircase moves quite a bit, actually, when you walk up. So it's like a beautiful welcome gesture. And then you come up in a big floor, first floor, where we combine everything which is about communication. So you'll find all the assistants, all the IT support, the libraries, the meeting rooms, and most important, the canteen. And the canteen is not only a canteen, because like in a party, the party is always the nicest in the kitchen, because there people chat and eat. Same happens in corporations. You want to create an opportunity where people meet, and that's always a good part. Is always where you can get food. So here you'll find a lot of these things for the whole building. And what we did is, and here comes like a comparison with restaurant design. We create opportunities which are totally different. It's not like a series of conference rooms which look all the same. Actually, we only have 2. But it's a big field of different offerings, like big tables with 10 people for big meetings, a room-in-a-room situation, a waiting zone, a library, a high table where you just have a coffee quickly and discuss something very quickly, outdoor furniture, indoor, which makes the transition to the outdoor terrace, then spaces where you can hide a little bit in there. And so whatever you need to discuss over the day, or whether you're going to eat in a group or whatever, or they have, of course, 3 times a week, they assemble all the 130 people from the Stuttgart branch there to have a show fix. Everything happens there. And so the place becomes busy over the whole day and creates a communication hub, which works perfect for them. So people start eating again together, which they didn't do the last 20 years. Of course, we have closed conference rooms. And then going up to the offices, we have 5 floors of offices. We use the same grammar, but every floor looks different. So some are more open, some are more, it's like a little city, you might say. And now, if you want to have these people going down to use that communication area, you have to take something away from them. You have to make it attractive, of course. So here, you only have a standing meeting point. If you want to sit down, you go down. Only water. If you want juice, you go down. Only bad coffee. If you want to have good coffee, you go down. Well, this is really important, because otherwise people are lazy. Everybody, you would sit there, have lunch there, make your meeting there, and you're not going to move. So so if you want to mix up, you have to make attractive offerings for that. Now, if you look at this thing, you'll see that there's a rather low ceiling in the center where we have all the MEPs, and it's an aluminum ceiling, which really pulls the light in there. So we kind of work with light here, artificial light as well as natural light, to kind of play with the situation to make actually a benefit out of it, that we have that low ceiling. So we actually pull the light, the natural light, into the space. And this part of the ceiling is like 5 centimeters lower than the rest of it. So you will create an edge here, which is not linear, it kind of meanders, which zones the walking area with the sitting area. And at the same time, here we have a table which has like a attached storage space which floats. So we create kind of a virtual office within the open space. So we'll have a line here, we'll have a border there, when we have these attached columns, storage spaces over there. So actually they're sitting in the 4 people office they used to know, but at the same time they're sitting in the open space. They have a wonderful acoustic. If they stand up, they can communicate. There are not more than 24 people per floor, so the neighborhoods are not too big, so it's not becoming anonymous. So there is something which we play with, which they know of, and which kind of is in their memory, but at the same time we're transferring that into a new situation. And of course we have acoustic ceiling or whatever, and all these things never look that clean. It's all magnetic, so they can display plans and stuff, and it's a really nice dense working situation. That's not from us, unfortunately. Now, since the first project I did, and I was a student then, we have this whole discussion with, I like it, but is it really timeless? Which is a silly discussion, really, because good design always is timeless. We had the chance to work on a very prestigious project, which was the successor of the famous Werner Panton canteen of the political magazine Der Spiegel in Germany, in Hamburg, which for us always has been an exemplary project for what we mean with identity architecture. Because this is a project which is always out of any time, and it stands for its own. And this is a project, actually they did not only do the canteen, there was a swimming pool, and they did all the office spaces as well, but they killed that pretty quickly after, the people working there said, well, we can't work in a total purple world or something. But the canteen really became an icon for the Spiegel for many decades. So if you thought about the Spiegel, you thought about the canteen, which was interesting. And it was hated, and it was loved, and it was hated, and then it became more and more loved over the decades. So when the Spiegel actually decided to move their headquarters within Hamburg to the Hafen city, to the harbor, and they learned that they can't move that part of the building. Actually, it was for most of the employees, and at the Spiegel there's a specialty that the employees own half of the enterprise. It was not so much important how the building looked like, how they're going to work. Of course, that was discussed. The emotional debate was what's going to happen with the canteen and how it's going to look like, which was interesting for us because it shows us that actually interior design has the power to become an emotional fixed point for a big enterprise, although it's only a place to get food. Now, but it's more than that. And that's something a lot of businesses today discover, as it would be new. They always knew that the place is not only about food, it's about communication. So when we came to the Spiegel, we learned that there's like very elaborate routines how you would sit down to indicate whether you could join or not. They all would have like meeting set up for weeks in advance. It's the communication hub for the Spiegel staff. So we had to deal with that, and of course it was quite a task not to copy Panton, but at the same time wanted to do something which has the chance at least to create the same situation for the employees for the new building. So what we came up with was we thought about a concept which came from both ends. We thought about the location, which is close to the water, and we loved that light reflexes we would see on the water when the water is kind of moving and the sun comes down, it becomes all this beautiful flickering light. And at the same time, as we said, the company is called Spiegel, the mirror. It's a communication space. It's about reflecting opinions, personalities. They fight quite intensely there. So all that was in the project. And at the same time, the we don't have Rudolf Augstein, who was like the legendary owner of the Spiegel when Werner Panton did that, who just said, well, just do it, right? So today we have a facility manager who says, well, no carpet, no colored tables, nothing at the ceiling which could be too difficult to clean. So you have all these things, which are just part of the world. And then, of course, we have fire exit routes through our building. And of course, it needs to be multi-purpose space, so they can do like big meetings in there. So at the end, we're like, well, what do you want to do with this thing, Now, you might have seen that already. A lot of our project, and we'll see that later. We love ceilings. Ceilings are like a totally forgotten surface of modernism. But if you look at historic architecture and interiors, there's always something going on the ceiling. The ceiling is a beautiful surface to create identity. And it's a shame that modernity totally forgot about that. And today it's a carrier of stuff. Light, HVAC, sprinklers, speakers, whatever. But it's much more in that. So we do the opposite. We don't show all that technology stuff. It's in there, but it needs to be there, It just needs to work. But the ceiling is a beautiful design surface, especially in commercial places, because a restaurant like the Spiegel Canteen, if it's full at lunch, you don't see chairs and floors and tables anymore because like 500 people are in the space. But you're always going to see the ceiling. So we created a ceiling out of 4,300 aluminum plates, which are polished, and they hang with 4 degrees angle. So they create like the same situation, like that little moving water around it. And the natural light as well as the artificial light, how we designed it, creates that beautiful light situation in that space. And at the same time, it becomes an iconic feature for the new canteen. Now again, what you don't see is all the technology because it works basically like a functional ceiling. Everything is behind that. All these plates have a gradient perforation, which makes these plates acoustically absorbing. There's another acoustically absorbing layer above. And so although we have a hard floor, we have only glass facades around us. We have a wonderful acoustic in that space. All these curtains out of these non-flammable rods can be taken out within a couple of minutes, so we have the multi-purpose situation. And it's a very complex system of how we guide the light here. So basically what happens, we design these light fixtures, which have, again, a gradient printed on them. So there's like an indirect light coming up. There's a direct light, a spotlight, going to the table. The table, again, it's a granite table which has a laser pattern and a gradient lasered on it. So it's matte at the center and it's glossy outside. The spots hits the matte part. It reflects back to the ceiling, but it doesn't reflect into your face. So we have ceiling light, and at the same time, the table, which could be moved anywhere, has a certain situation where it belongs to, and everybody knows it belongs there because that's where the light is. And so we position these tables in the space. The only wall we had, the little wall we had, we wanted to create soft. So it's a wooden wall, but it's ondulated, which helps, again, with the acoustic. And at the same time, it kind of softens that space compared to all these big glass facades. Here you see a shot of the ceiling. You'll see that light shaders. And here, for example, you'll see part of the air conditioning. And that's the view for outside. Again, the Spiegel Canteen becomes like the business card. It's the only visible part of the company to outside. We do a lot of restaurants, and I'll only show you quickly 2 or 3 of them. That's the restaurant for the headquarters of Motel One, big hotel chain in Germany. We did their headquarters, and that's the restaurant for their staff as well as for the hotel guests. It's combined with a hotel. In a rather, let's say, ugly building, I think you could say that. So what we're trying to do is to do like an indoor-outdoor situation. We bring the flaps of the windows to the inside, covering a little bit that kind of very dry facade and bringing in a very dreamlike, beautiful Italianesque atmosphere, which again needs to work the whole day, from breakfast to lunch, to romantic dinners, which is quite a task. You'll do that with light, you'll do that with different seating situation. Again, you'll propose opportunities because it's different whether you're going to have like a very quick breakfast, whether people don't want to spend too much time for lunch, or they'll have like a very long romantic dinner before they go to cinema. So the same space needs to answer all these different needs. That's the view from the lobby. So it's like a promise already. We do a lot of chain restaurants as well, fast casual restaurants. Waku Waku, it's a project in Hamburg as well, is a project run by the former European CEOs of Burger King who wanted to start a sustainable fast food chain. That's the second restaurant we did for them. And it's a very deep floor plan, a very small facade, very deep. So again, you only have a split of a second to communicate what it is about, especially if a brand which is not like super well known yet. So we have to make a point about being sustainable, being organic food, being tangible. So what we did is we built the whole place out of reclaimed wood, and using images, and you'll see that quite often in our work, which plays with images of our collective memory as well as subjective memory. So here, of course, we'll play with an idea of the old store, where you trust your guy, you can touch things, and it doesn't look like an anonymous fast food chain. The long table in the center, the high table, indicates speed and pulls the people into the depth of the space. It's, of course, beautifully visual merchandise. The light fixtures are only outlines of light fixtures and cast beautiful shadows on that wall. On the other side, we invited a Berlin artist, Chris Rehberger, who came with his students and made a beautiful piece of art with 25,000 nails and thread to create a beautiful visual and re-emphasizing good for you, good for Earth, the claim of the chain. And now the best way to communicate and to prove that you mean it to be sustainable is, of course, to reuse things. And that's what we do. We did that in the first location already. That's what we do with the chairs. So here, since we have a lot of high chairs, we collect the chairs from the first people who came in. We cut they're all different. We cut the legs, and we have like a corporate base to mount them on. So here you'll see like a collection of all different modern, classic, Baroque chairs. They all cut the keys, and they all have the same base, and the corporate color has like socks of them. We did the same thing in the first restaurant, just the other way around. Again, a ceiling project. That's a project for the local football club of Stuttgart. It's a bad issue right now because they... but it's like their local fan restaurant, right? Here we use the ceiling with quotes there. Like we collected quotes from the past 130 years or something of the club, which are rather funny. You need to determine about that. So it's really funny to read all these things. And at the same time, we're using these quotes, again, to pull people in, to organize the space, to zone the space. So you'll find high table, you'll find lounges, you'll find more relaxing areas and more fine dining areas at the part. You'll find a big stadium type area close to the kitchen with all the autograph cards from the famous players. You can look into the kitchen. The restaurant is called 1893 because that's the founding year of the club. You can look for yourself at the picture. Actually, we're in there. And at the fine dining part, we have all these little flags in the club colors, and actually they are 1893 flags, so you might want to count them. And then you'll look up and you'll see all these nice quotes which reflect pretty much where the club is. So this one says, for example, it's the former mayor of Stuttgart who says, the city is going to do everything for the club, given that it's not going to cost any money. We do a lot of residential work. We love that. It's a beautiful piece of work because you really look very closely with people, and it's like the most intimate way of what we call identity architecture. You know, you go through personal routines, you get all the little secrets, you open all the cabinets to understand how people work and live. And that's very interesting because there's a big shift, actually, which we at least notice in our work, from people like 10 or 15 years ago who would bring a lot of stuff. They would have like an art collection, they would have like a library, they would have things. Now, today, 9 of 10 projects we're doing in the residential part, people don't have anything anymore. They just don't have anything. So basically, doing an apartment becomes a branding process. And we'll do the whole thing up to the soap on the sink. Art consulting, name it. You know, people are helpless. And the pictures they putting up to you are not pictures from private homes anymore, but they referring to their experience, which is mostly hotels and restaurants. And that kind of shows quite interesting how our life changed within the last decade or two, from, you know, being more private. 20 years ago, I grew up in a world, you know, where when you had friends, you invited them over to your home and you would cook. Today, you'll meet up in a restaurant. So the restaurant becomes a very, like, you know, famous third place, like the place which kind of generates all sort of implications, not only, you know, that you're there and that this is like the way how you present yourself and to your friends, but it has an implication to all sorts. It has an implication on how we work together. It has an implication on how we live together. That's a project for a young couple, 2 kids, and it's a typical project for us as because you don't see it's a really low budget project. You wouldn't believe how less money this thing cost, but it doesn't look like that, and that was always something we love to do. Actually, they were quite lucky to get a piece of military barracks, which then was an advertising agency, and we converted that into a loft for them, which has a 2-story loft situation, very generous. So we're looking from the staircase into the kitchen and the dining area. And of course, all a project like that for people who don't have a picture, who don't have a book, who don't have a bottle of wine, basically, you know, is about generating images which you feel that they are in their heart, which are part of their desires, which are part of their potential lifestyle, which they can deal with, which doesn't overwhelm them too much, but they need to attach to that emotionally. And that's always the interesting thing. I did my second project I did in my career, I was 5th semester, was for the same doctor I did my first project. I did his doctor's room. I did an apartment. And that was an interesting one. He was actually a guy with a collection of stuff, and he came together with a woman who was even a bigger collector of basically everything. And they moved together in an apartment which was rather big, but too small for both their stuff. And I think I'm losing here my thing. And I was really nervous about this because I thought, well, this guy is going to live 24 hours straight in my aesthetics, in my world. You know, he's going to go from my apartment to my workplace and back and forth. We worked a year on this project, and since it was so dense, pretty much it was done, right, when we left after a year. You couldn't bring in any other piece of furniture. Everything, when we had this maison de verre in mind, you know, so it was like all kinetic, and you could transform the space, but there was nothing to add. It was done. And then I went to America. I got my scholarship. I went to Chicago, and I came back a year later. And I was really nervous to meet them again because I wanted to see whether it's just a piece of design for them, you know, which they kind of, I don't want to touch it. How can I deal with it? Or whether they own it, because that's what you want. You want people to own your work, and that's where something very important, which we learned very quickly, that once our work is done, we out. You know, we out. It's not our work. It's not. I find this very peculiar if people are kind of so protective, like for decades of their work. It's theirs, and it happened. You know. So actually, they lived in that apartment for 16 years. They sold it. The woman who bought it didn't change anything, and we built the next apartment for our clients. So this shows a little bit, you know, how important it is to really have a very good understanding of, and I think it's more reading between the lines rather than reading some briefing or something, about what you can do with people. You know, how far can you go? What's their limit? Where do they want to go? What can't they express but dreaming of? So this is a project which has a lot to do with dreams of a young couple, actually Italian guys, who came to money with their business, and it's like the first time they'll just say, well, I made it, kind of thing, you know. The view outside is nice, but the wall is ugly and the window is ugly. So what we did is we made a mirror around it and projected what you would see outside, the trees, onto the mirror. So now you look at the mirror and the trees and you don't look at the ugly window. Yeah? We like mirrors a lot. You'll see a lot of mirrors in our work. You know, the open kitchen. Of course they don't cook. They can't cook, you know. But it's important to have a big kitchen, right? Yeah, and you'll find surprising things, little glimpses of something you wouldn't expect to see, some things they don't understand, but they're so proud of because they don't understand it, and they'll show it off to everybody. And on the upper floor, we build a house within the house because the husband can't stand to sleep with light, so he needs absolutely darkness. So we built a little house, like a gray house, in the house. Whereas everything else is just like improvised, pretty much. That's the bathroom, which stands like pretty much open to the ceiling. And that's the bedroom. Now, when I say we work from no budget to no budget, you know, that's like that's not no budget, but like a low budget, right? We do, on the other hand, we do projects at the same time, and again, we love to have that whole range. That's a project, actually, to show you something we're working on right now. That's a project we're doing right now in Seoul. It's for the owner of Lotte. Lotte is one of the big Asian department store and hotel conglomerates, how they say in Korea. It's more than a corporation. It's like they do everything, right?
Suites.
It's like they're really huge, you know. And Mr. Shin, who is the owner, he built a 120-story high-rise in Seoul, and we're doing his apartment at the top floor. So here's a couple of images about, you know, this is like his private office thing. And of course, you know, this is a totally different kind of idea of representation and about value and what you show and what you don't show. And again, we buy the art as well. And that's his apartment. Of course, it's not his apartment, you know, it's one of his apartments. You know, a guy at this level has like 20. So it's like he spends a year there or something. But it's like a very important thing because it's a very important project for them. Dining, the kitchenette, you might say, because of course he's not going to cook there. Living area. And the bedroom. So it's a very sensual yet very representative place, which plays, of course, with classic elements, since it's not only him and there's his 90-year-old father who has a say in there as well. Korea is like Japan, very hierarchical, and there's like 1,000 managers underneath him who have a say as well, because they think he doesn't know what he likes. So it's a very careful mixture of being very soft, very, very sensual, and at the same time classic enough so he's not scared. He understands it. That's a project we did in Uzbekistan. As I said,
the one with the airplanes.
The airplane comes later. We had a lot of airplanes in this as well. Working in a different culture not only means that you have to understand how that culture works and what their ideas and imageries and memories are, but of course it's beautiful because you see other technologies, you'll see people, you meet people who do something which we forgot how to do that, for example. So Uzbekistan is an Islamic country, so it's all about ornaments. And you have wonderful people there who know, for example, that like the favorite thing to do is like perforated stucco. Actually, it's our third project in the country. I'll show you later at the end of the first project, and then you'll get the whole picture. So we were invited to do a big mansion there. It's a rather big place, 2,800 square meters, like 46 rooms, for a woman with 2 kids. So we're looking here at the big salon, like the main living room, where we invited Uzbekistan artists to make this beautiful ceiling, according to our design, of course, which takes on the historical craft of Uzbekistan, creating a dome here, which has a beautiful suspended light fixture we designed. And so the whole building actually has not one style, but it's like a journey through different styles, bringing a comfortable situation, knowing that, again, this lady wouldn't bring anything to this building. When we actually turned the project over, her assistant panically flew to Paris to buy some baccarat stuff, just to have something in there. So you have to make a situation which instantly feels, and that's again part of our time. We don't have time anymore. Nobody has time anymore. Nobody has time to grow something, or gives things time to grow something. Everything needs to be instantly there and looks like that it's always had been there. So a home needs to be instantly comfortable. It has everything there, all the art, everything. So this is like a trick. And actually these photos were done before she moved in, and I think you get the point. So what we try to do is to have very distinct areas which are very, very different to each other, but still making the whole place to one atmospheric zone, which is very comfortable and cozy, although the place is really huge. And of course, working on a project like that is sometimes really fun, because you can really enjoy material and get to build things which you do in a Central Europe project probably not so much. So here we'll see the main salon, which takes on the historical, traditional Uzbekistan column shapes and patterns, and at the same time it's very contemporary. That's the entrance situation. Again, just the position of modern features, historical features, craft from the region. The ceiling again in a finished state. And then we'll have a lot of lounges and guest lounges and suites, which all have a very a lot of detail. I mean, in our architecture, you'll see that we really care about the detail. And so all the projects we're doing, we follow them through. We always till the very end. We never only sell design. That's something we don't do. We always, however the setup is, and we're extremely flexible. I think there's no contract we didn't do yet, and there's no model of how to organize a project we didn't do yet, but it's always, the condition is that we have control about our project till the very end, however it's going to be done. Because we know that at the end, the detail counts. The detail makes the project. It makes the difference whether you love a project or it's only nice, whether it's relevant for you or it's just something. And so it's a lot about details in here. Meeting area for guests. The big staircase in the center. One of the closet spaces. The main closet, that's again a view in the ceiling where you would put on your dress and you have mirrors all the way around. The shoe closet. You don't have something like that? Master bathroom. So you'll see then, I don't want to go too deep into that, but it's like the boys' bathroom, the girls' bathroom, a study where we took an Indian palace and milled that into the wood. A guest suite, very feminine. Beautiful hand-painted silk. Cinema. The wine cellar before they bought wine. And of course a spa with a sauna. And the most important, the bathtub for her. You can change light and it reflects endlessly. Yeah, back to the profane. We do a lot of retail projects. We'll start with the big one, which is a shopping mall we just finished last year in Stuttgart. Now, a shopping mall is an interesting field for interior design because it's a contradiction in itself. You want to make a very memorable space, so you create a place rather than just like a exchangeable shopping mall. But at the same time, you can't be too loud because the business is done by the shops left and right. So whatever you do, you need to make sure that people look left and right, not in the center. There's the business. So there's a contradiction in what you do. You have to balance that really nicely. Again, it's about creating a situation where these are the heroes, and at the same time, you want to create a big gesture at the center. You want to have the floor slabs between the two floors not too thick, because then you wouldn't go up. You want to be as transparent as possible, so you'll see what you'll find upstairs. You want to see where you can go up, so we'll make that very visible. So you'll see that again, we'll have a very clean, soft ceiling. It's actually a very elegant architecture, very ordered. Again, everything is collected in that one dark line, light, air conditioning, sprinkler, and that guides you through the whole space. Ceiling becomes very thin at the end, has a beautiful lighting there, and then transparent. And from the logo, which was given before, we had a circle motif, because the logo was set up in circles, and we played with these circles as a matter of identity in different ways. So in the center, you'll have that one column, and it's actually a rather dumb layout. We were unable to change that. So we had this only spot where this whole mall elevates through all the stores, and there's a column in so we have these rings playing around that. There's a fountain, so you can memorize where to meet, so you can name these things. It's always about being able to give things a name and to narrate that. And then we have low entrances, and so every entrance gets a very distinct lighting situation, always playing with the circles. So you can memorize, it's that entrance or that entrance, because the mall has a rather complex topography situation. So what's being on the ground floor there, it's not necessarily the ground floor over there. It's a different floor. So you can memorize these things. Then we have another entrance which is very tight and high. So there's like a chain of rings pulling you up. And then there's like a main entrance which has like a broad pull, and you want to get always people up to the upper floor, because nobody wants to go to the upper floor for themselves. So all malls work very good in the ground floor and the basement, but always have a difficulty in the upper floors. And then you'll see that counting through, carried through in the parking garage. So, the old trick. It's only like a fraction of a second. You'll see the circle full, and then it falls apart again into only fragments. And then, of course, the escalators are being very visible, so you'll see where you move, and it's easy to orientate. And again, it gives you a very strong, powerful image. And we wanted to give that mall a certain quality level, because it's not too big, and it's an inner city mall. So it was important to have enough substance in the interior architecture to actually stay alive over decades, and not becoming like what a lot of malls fate is in inner cities, that they start strong and then they become like cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and then at the end you'll close them down. So we wanted to give enough power from the architecture side. And with a lot of our projects, we do our furniture and our light fixture ourselves. So this is, for example, again, a part of our design. All the seating areas in the mall are done by our product design department. They are done in carbon with beautiful leather upholstery, and we'll have different shapes, and it's a beautiful thing which works perfectly into that context. The second project in Uzbekistan. The first project is this big thing, and the second one is this one. we were invited to do a retail project, a jeweler who was to display and sell ancient Uzbekistan jewelry as well as contemporary jewelry. And the location is a historical building, and you need to know that Tashkent was destroyed 95% in the 60s by an earthquake. So there's only a very few historical buildings left in the city, but actually it's not a historical building. The actually historical building is like 100 meters next to that. So they just mirrored it, they copied it. Uzbekistan is pretty quick in building things. They built that like within a week. You wouldn't believe it. In a week. Done. However, it's a historical building playing with historical features. And again, we have that perforated stucco in the facade. So what we came up with is we transformed the space to a jewelry case in bringing in a second skin, which is made out of stainless steel. The stainless steel floats like 30 millimeters in front of the old structure, is mirror polished and has a modern ornament. So what happens is you'll discover immediately that it's about jewelry, and at the same time we have a juxtaposition of the contemporary ornament as well in the historical ornament, because it's being mirrored in this space. So there's a juxtaposition of old and new, and that's exactly what happens in that space. And of course, again, it makes a very beautiful, iconic space, which seemingly doesn't end at the end. You know, we have a matte mirror at the end. A light fixture draws you into that space. And it's a hierarchy of perception as usual. You have a big image, and once you turn around, you only see the little vitrine and you focus on the product. So that's, of course, very important. You know, you need to know your role. First, the big image, so you can memorize the space, then the product, and then the product is the hero and not you. And again, of course, you don't see all the technology because it's hidden behind all these stainless steel perforations. And here you see the view from outside, which is beautiful overlapping of these two layers. As I said, we work a lot with memory as a tool to study how we get people to adopt a space. How do I identify with a space? How do I like a space? How does a space become relevant for me? Especially in retail business as well as hospitality business, there's storytelling. You know, there's like everybody talks about storytelling. And of course, storytelling is an interesting fact. Now, what happens is that we're confronted every day with 1 million stories because we have our smartphone and our electronic devices and stuff. And our perception is that the more we confront it with stories, the less stories we have. People don't have stories anymore. That's, you know, it's reflected in our residential work when people come in and they don't have anything anymore, and it's reflected in commercial work where you have to make up a story, which of course is credible, is relevant, it's self-conscious enough, but has enough space for the client to jump in. Now, to tell a story is actually pretty boring. If you tell a complete story. If I tell a complete story as a sender of a place like that, you might like it or you not might like it. So you have a pretty big chance that you don't might like it and you lose your client. So what we're trying to do is, in our architecture, and you see that quite a bit, is that we only start a conversation, basically. We give hints of stories in placing shapes, images, motives of things which might connect to your personal, your subjective, or your collective memory. Now here we have a pharmacy, a small pharmacy in a city center of a smaller city next to Stuttgart. Generation change. Now pharmacies, and I think it's pretty much the same in Switzerland from what I saw, changed from like a very personal, you know, there's the pharmacist giving you advice, to like a supermarket situation. Because of course they have a lot of competition nowadays. They have chain pharmacies, there's online pharmacies, there's the drugstores coming in, trying to get their business, and of course they're trying to get the drugstore business in selling stuff which is not typically pharmacy. So what we try to do, and she wants to specialize in naturopathy. So the task was to enable, to create an image which creates trust with people coming in, which is so to avoid borders and boundaries between the pharmacist and the client, and at the same time, say, well, we are a modern pharmacy carrying everything you need. We are very upfront with what we do, and at the same time establishing the trust. So it's a Baroque city, and what you see is that we're playing with these two elements. You'll have a very clean modern architecture, rounded corners, rounded ceiling, very clean, Korean counters, very ordered, structured, and at the same time you'll find the cobblestone floor from outside coming into the store. You'll find a ceiling, and that was something we found so interesting, because if you look at old pharmacies, like really old pharmacies, they often enough have beautiful ceilings, carved ceilings, painted frescoes, etc. And of course, we all know these, and so we hired an artist and gave her the briefing to. We gave her like 12 herbs, since it's about naturopathy, and said to her, well, reinterpret that in a contemporary way, using a color range we gave to her, which again comes back to like a more medieval color range. So we have like gold, turquoise, the bright green, the yellow. And so you use a motif which we all know from things we saw in our collective memory, and reinterpret that in a very self-conscious contemporary way, and creating this oscillation between old and new, things we feel that we can trust, and at the same time being a very open, service-oriented provider of modern pharmacists. So we lifted the counter so you can see the person. The counter is not very deep, so you have a direct dialogue. It's all about really having a personal conversation with somebody. And actually, that's, again, the ceiling becomes an icon. It's easy to narrate, it's easy to talk about, and you can memorize it quickly. Actually, we use that for packaging as well. There was a bus driving through the city for years with that pattern on it. And it was incredibly success. She was invited actually to roll that out throughout Germany, but she didn't want to do that because she had 2 kids. But it shows with a very limited tools, you can do like a big thing. And now the building is actually extremely ugly. And pharmacists, at least in Germany, have the tendency to make even more uglier windows, like with self-painted, or you have a flu, what you can do, something. It's all ugly, right? It's not their job, right? So we thought the pharmacy itself need to be the advertisement for the pharmacy. So that's how it looks from outside. The shelves becomes transparent. Again, transparency translates into openness, into the quality of service you would get there. And of course, she has a part where she can display seasonal things, but the pharmacy itself stands for itself. We do a lot of retail projects abroad. That's Bulk, a project which is very interesting in a lot of respects. First of all, you couldn't do that in Western Europe because it's a home appliance chain. But they brought the coffee machine and the blender to a level of luxury which wouldn't be seen in Germany or in Western Europe. So here, Putin buys his coffee machine. Now what's interesting is with a lot of these countries, that's like a second generation of development. First, they had the big Versace belt, and because they needed to show that they're rich, and which translate often enough in design into classical architecture because they wouldn't know better. And classical architecture seems to be like a safe hub for them to say, well, see my gold, see my stuff, right? Now there's a second generation, same in China, which learned, which is more educated, which traveled more, and so they're looking for different means how to represent. And this is exactly where this chain jumps in with things of the household. So it's a society which learns lifestyle not only in the luxury segment, but also in the growing middle class segment. And they're looking for images. They don't know how to do it. Of course, they're looking for Western brands, which give them trust. And then this is an interesting part. Actually, it's a Russian company. All the products they have are pretty much products of China. And most people in Russia think it's a German brand. So here we are in the globalized world. So this is a prime location in Moscow, a really, really expensive location in Moscow. And the money they spend on this thing, I thought they're crazy. Actually, they did their return on invest within a year. So this is like a roaring success in Russia. Now, the trick is, it's not bought by the ladies, it's a guy's thing. Here, the guy's buying toys, right? So it's about technology, and it's about longevity, and about perfection, and they'll buy their little toy, and they're so proud to get a coffee machine for 3,000 euros or something, and they want to show it all their friends. So what we did is we created a situation where it's all about this thing. It's a precise cubic architecture. It's all natural stone, mitered, light perfect, and the wall, it's more like a museum. And all these machines, which are very much like stainless steel and very bodily, they become a piece of art, actually, and they're perfectly lit. They have a light from the back, they have a light from the front, they have a light at the top, so they really glow, and you really emphasize the object rather than the function. They're good function too, but it's and everything underlines the sexiness of the technology, and at the same time, the wall with the walnut veneer and the little ornament in there talks about lifestyle and about the bridge to actually more like a fashion boutique. So that was the briefing, to like a Louis Vuitton boutique for coffee machines, and creates this kind of mixture, and it's an extremely success. Of course, we did a flagship store like this, and then there's like a second version which looks like that, but it's with cheaper materials to roll out for the middle class locations. So here you see, how a toaster could be displayed. In the center, there's a big volume coming down with the brand color, which is that orange, very emotional technology. So you'll have the heart pulsing. That's the cash desk. Yeah. China, fun. We do a lot of work in China. Meanwhile, we have a very fast-growing office in Shanghai, and we do all kind of projects, residential projects as well as retail projects. And again, it's from low end to high end. That's a jewelry chain we did a couple years ago. And again, the beauty is that you have so quickly to learn all these things about how these things work. Because a Chinese girl, mid-20s, has a totally different set of dreams, of desires, of problems. It's not comparable with our target group when we do a project like that here. But that's the beauty, to go abroad and to learn something, learn all these things. Right now we're doing a project in Cairo, for example. I love it. We're setting up a new brand for electronic mega store. I immediately said yes because I haven't been to Cairo yet, and I loved it. So, I walk through bazaars and see how they're selling TVs, and you'll translate that into a new business model. So coming back to this one. So here we have a jewelry chain. There's an established jewelry chain, and they created a new company which addresses the young girls, which with an idea of mix and match like Pandora. So you can collect the little stones, and you can do your own rings, your own bracelets and necklaces by yourself, and you get a little bit addicted, and you buy not only for birthday or Christmas, but you come every month and buy a new piece. But it's not fashion jewelry, it's real jewelry. So you have to understand that a Chinese girl is a single child, because they have the single child policy till last year. So it's a totally spoiled girl. Totally spoiled girl. And she is romantic at heart. Now, again, Chinese society is a very image-based communication, so they have it's like very romantic images, and even a 45-year-old woman you would meet at the end is it's a girl. It's a girl at heart, with everything comes to it. So, and then the society is stressed. And that is a big change to when we came to China the first time, like 15 years ago. It's a stressed society because there's a growing middle class. You defend your lifestyle. You have to grow your lifestyle. You have to live in cities which are poisoned. Everybody knows that they're poisoned. There's traffic beyond words. The cities like Beijing or Shanghai are huge. So people are stressed. So indulgence and to treat yourself becomes like a major impact for everything you'll do. So there's no project in China which doesn't deal with sustainability and being not poisoned on one hand, and the other hand is to do something for yourself, which is unheard or something new for society, which we all know has a communist history. 10 years ago, nobody would talk about the individual. Now the individual is everything. So here it's about dreams. It's a project about dreams. And about a dense narration. So what we did is actually we tried to get away from the classic way of how we sell jewelry, which again in China is different than in Germany or in Europe, because jewelry is being sold mainly like in a bazaar. It's all counter business. People sit down on counters and look on the counter and choose things, and it's being sold mostly in department stores, 95%. Beside the luxury brands, which of course are always like the heroes, Tiffany's, etc., which are doing whatever they do worldwide. But the big part of the business, like the middle class business, is basically a bazaar business. So we try to change this perception of how to present jewelry, and it's presented in a very story-like, dream-like situation. So we have paper-cut stories of butterflies and birds, and you're with your horse, you ride away into fairyland, and there is no commercial project in China without the Eiffel Tower. No project, because the Eiffel Tower, of course, is the ultimate icon of romance and love and well-being. So here you actually see displays and photos we did in the store, as well as for the brand communication. We did the whole brand communication as well. Which is kind of interesting because, again, we need to understand what we're talking about. We did all the photo shootings in Germany because, of course, they like a European face rather than a Chinese face, because the point of desire is always, to look most Western as possible. And again, you have to learn that a Chinese girl doesn't want to look tanned. So you have to, instead of, Germany, you would do a warm light, so you look very good. Deep textures. In China, you have to do cold light because they want you to look pale. That's a mistake you do only once. Okay, and that's the store. So you see the store doesn't look like a jewelry store anymore. It's more like a magic forest kind of thing. You browse, girls like to come in with your girlfriend, and then they'll browse through and they'll see little stories and the displays and these columns where you'll see these paper cuts and the choreographed jewelry. You have a counter, so they discover, it's jewelry, and you have butterflies flying through the space. And then you'll end up at a vanity table, kind of sales desk, where you can sit down with your girl, with your best friend, and then you have like the jewelry box, and you can take out all these different collections and start putting these things together by yourself, of course consulted by a sales person. And the whole space is basically a dense storytelling of what you could do and dream of with your jewelry. And again, it's about the detail, how everything falls through. Now, this project, brand development is including interior design 2.5 months. First store built within 6 weeks. They're going to build like 150 stores a year. So again, what you have to learn, painful, that the first store is not important to them. They don't do mock-ups, they don't do tests, they don't do, you just go for it, because it's more important for them that the chain grows, that they roll out, rather than to have the first thing perfect. The fifth thing is going to be good, perfect, depends. So the growth dynamic and the dynamic how to make a decision is something really refreshing. We love that. It's stressing, but it's really interesting. And for us, again, the balance to work in different cultures pays off, because here we have a culture which more and more has a main focus in defending what they have. There you got a culture where most people think they have something to gain, so they go for it. So the dynamic is really, really intense. I just met like 2 weeks ago a potential new client who wants to do a chain for non-poisoned building material. Huge stores, 1,500 square meters. He looks for an architect. He wants to, then it's like 2 weeks ago, right? Yeah. Then he asked me whether we could do the first 2,000 square meter store finished by 10th of June because he wants to build another 1,000 this year. And they'll do it. They'll do it. They don't wait for you. You just go for it or you leave it. Of course, we're not going to do this. We do the scheme, the brand manual, the first stores, and then they'll have a building department. But just imagine, it's like 33 stores a day. So, Dada, a beautiful project. Beautiful project. Bolon, another project in China. It's it's a sunglass company, and actually it's the third largest sunglass company in the world. So again, that's very typical for China. We wouldn't know these companies. They're huge, they're rich, they already have thousands of stores. But they're in the transition of a situation where it was enough to open a store and put some merchandise there to now become a brand. First a national brand, but they all have their strategy already set up to conquer the Western world as well. So here we have a very powerful company who worked very long as an OEM, of course, for Western companies. And they have different brands. And Bolon, the main brand, as we can see, the Eiffel Tower, is a French connotated brand. So they play with the idea of, French elegance, fashion connotated. They bought Sophie Marceau as a brand representative. So that was the briefing we had. And then something happens, which always happens with these guys, because they're rich and they travel a lot. They show you where they buy stuff, and they want that for themselves, no matter whether it's good for the target group or not. So this guy shows me all the Dior and Givenchy shops he was buying his clothes at. So it's like, I want to have this, It's like, I mean, you're sure? I mean, it's like your target group is middle class. Are we going to put up the threshold too high? No, we want this. Okay, so again, you need to balance that out, and you have to understand where he comes from and translate that in a feasible model. So here, again, we have a situation that they all start now to do street stores, which like a 6 surface or 5 surface store. But the reality is most of the stuff they sell in a department store where they only have shop-in-shop systems, which are usually not higher than 140. So the idea was to create a display system for the glasses, which first of all displays the product beautifully, the colored glasses, the frames, and at the same time have an iconic display which you recognize very easily once you see that in a shopping mall or something like that. And that's what we came up with. It's a white wall system with horizontal and vertical fins coming out. And so every horizontal one carries a product. And as you can see, or you might see, from here there's a little LED with a lens integrated in that little 10 millimeter fin, which casts a beautiful spotlight onto the product. And at the same time, the horizontal one has a glass floor in it, so light comes from the back. So you have a beautiful light aura around the product, and you have a very iconic wall elevation and you see the colors of all the different glasses as well as all the plastics. And that's how the store looks like. We have a golden ceiling, so like the sun comes down, and the whole atmosphere is more like a fashion store rather than being an optometric store, because nobody wants to be sick. It's not about need glasses. It's about having a fashion accessory. Leather backdrops. And it's a very elegant, not like a typical optician-looking store. That's the consulting table, which again gives a comforting, holding leather backdrop which wraps around you. We work for big brands as well. To all these out. It's like one I'd like to show you. This is like a project we did for Axor, Hansgrohe. Philip Stark designed a new tap for them 2 years ago, which is very organic, and of course it has a beautiful new design flow of water, which uses not a lot of water, so it's about sustainability, about nature, quelle surprise, and about way to live with nature. So the task was to create, actually it's a photo set only. It's a key visual we designed for Hansgrohe, which they used for the campaign. And again, it's about desires and about wishes. So, of course, being open to the nature, having a more like Brazil-like situation of a almost not visible glass facade, looking into nature is one big picture. In residential projects, the past 10 years, the kitchen and the living room kind of melted together, and now everybody tries to melt the bedroom with the bathroom. So we'll show that there's a direct connection between these two. The bathroom is not longer a functional space. It becomes part of your lifestyle, of your living environment. There's natural light coming from the top in the shower. There's a mixture between modernity at the same time, textures which you love. You see that you love to touch them, things which you're self-confident to mix and match old and new. So there's a lot of codes hidden in this picture, which again, the whole picture is only about all that. And at the same time, the bathroom is in a size that you could reproduce it at home. And of course, it's going to be played through in different styles. The collection before was done by Patricia Occhiola, a very feminine product, and she designed the box as well with which the sales reps were to sell the product into the market. Now, the suitcase she designed was beautiful, but it was very feminine, and the problem is all these sales reps are guys. So they were kind of a little bit ashamed to walk around with that beautiful feminine suitcase. So Hansgrohe came to us and said, well, can't we just think about something, how to carry that product to the clients? And knowing that story, we came up with a, I think, quite nice idea. We thought the guys like tools and they like guns. So we had a gun holster manufacturer do a bag for us, which shows very beautiful the iconic outline of the product. It looks like a one. The guys are really have like a very masculine bag to carry. They're really proud of it. And it shows the product features very beautifully. And it was quite a success. Very nice. Okay, last chapter. Public buildings. Our project always have to do with context. And we love context, and we love to respect context, whether it's in Uzbekistan, or in China, where we have a different culture around ourselves, which informs what we do, or whether it's a historical building like this project we did in a small city close to Stuttgart. We did the town hall for Schorendorf. Now, this building is 400 years old. It's a landmark. We knew that we're not the last ones and not the first ones who are going to build something there. It's like a palimpsest, if you add something, you respect what you find, but you always being self-confident enough to add a contemporary message to that. Now, the interesting thing of this project is that the building was historically open. It's on the marketplace, and so the facades wasn't in there, and there was the market actually in the ground floor of the building. And what we did is we brought back the parliament, the city parliament, into that level. So from outside, from the market, you can look into the city parliament, and so they can really see the democratic things going on when the city parliament is singing. And of course, they can close it down if they have confidential meetings. So you'll see that is like a landscape that's coming from the entrance, and you'll see the whole building, the whole topography going down into, you end up in the city parliament. You'll see old columns which are actually 400 years old. We don't touch them with our ceiling, which comes in. You'll see things which are built in the 1970s or 80s. We just refreshed them. You'll see a ceiling which has an acoustic feature, but again, we'll play a little bit with the ceiling. It's quite dense at the center and becomes more and more quiet the more we go to the historic walls. So again, once we come to the historic walls, we don't touch it and we're very calm. Whereas in the center, we play it a little bit louder. When we come to the column, again, we don't touch the column. So it's a beautiful add-on, knowing, again, we're not the first ones, we're not the last ones. That's a view into the ceiling. And then that's the city parliament. So the ceiling develops into like an independent ceiling, which comes down, becomes the projector wall and the backdrop for the mayor. Instead of the loose chairs they had before, we organized it like a parliament with fixed chairs, so you actually give some value to what the guys are doing there, and show that they care. There's a second hall up there, floating above there. Here you see the ceiling comes down and becomes like a sharp edge, and then the space becomes extended with a mirror. And that's the view from the upper hall to the mayor's table. Last project. Our biggest project so far. As I said, we love doing adventures and we love doing things which are a little bit crazy. And I believe in energies. I think our office always grew and was successful in kind of following energies and putting an energy out. And I think that's why these kind of weird projects tend to come to us, because somehow the energy matches. Now, in 2009, in February, a friend called me up on a Sunday afternoon and said, well, look, there's a project in Uzbekistan. I don't know what it is about. It could be an opera house. I just got the plans. You're up for that. I think they need an interior architect urgently. I said, well, sure, let's do it. There's only one problem. I need a contract by tomorrow. So we did a contract. It turned out to be not an opera house. It's the most important political building in Uzbekistan. It's in Tashkent, the capital, at the main square. And it's the building where they welcome state guests and where they do all the state ceremonies and state events. We won a little competition within 10 days. And we got confirmation that we actually do the job first week of March. So the guy comes to us and says, well, good. Friday, he called me up Friday evening. We're going to do that together. We'll meet tomorrow at your office. So we met the next day, explaining, okay. Saturday. I'll need your passports. Tuesday, we're going to fly out to Uzbekistan. We're going to sign contract. And then it turned out the main problem of this project was that it needed to be finished by August 31st. Now the project is huge. It's like 40,000 square meters. You can, the Berlin Parliament, pretty much the same size, 75 by 125 meters. And that's what we found on March 9th when we went there. A steel structure, like a third done. People in quite interesting situations, like since they don't have a lot of stuff, they weld everything they need. So when they sit up there in 30-meter height to weld something, they weld before they weld out of Bewährungsstahl, like the steel rods. They'll do like a little seat for them and hang up there, and they'll have like a couple of extension cords connected to each other to get some. That's how they do the things, right? So we saw that, and we got really scared, So we met the guy. It's actually a private built project. So there's was the richest person in Uzbekistan who gave that to the government as a gift. The guy comes up. We met there Saturday 9th. It was raining. 9 big limousines, security guys. We meet in a container. The guy looks through our portfolio, doesn't say a word for half an hour. Looks up, looks me in the eyes, and I love that. Nobody needs contracts. You just look in your eyes and shake your hands, right? And the guy says, well, turnkey? I was like, sure, turnkey. Look, he signed. And we've been in an adventure. So we had 5.5 months to build this thing. And of course, they wanted unique. They wanted to have something which the world hasn't seen before in Uzbekistan. The briefing was to put Uzbekistan back on the map. Now, this is like a classic in identity architecture task, right? There you got a country which has a beautiful past. You know, Tashkent being one of the centers of the Silk Road has fantastic architecture. Uzbekistan has fantastic architecture. A lot of World Heritage sites in Samarkand, Bukhara, Khiva, etc. Beautiful architecture. They've been part of the Soviet Union, of course, and of course, being independent for 20 years, they hate the Soviet Union. And they love it at the same time because they're so intertwined with their culture. They look out for the West. The West loves Uzbekistan because they have a geostrategical good location in the world. But at the same time, they don't like him because it's a kind of, well, you know, it's not like a real democracy. The guy is president since 20 years, like all these Central Asian countries. And they're rich because they have a lot of resources. They have uranium, they have gas, they have cotton, and they don't know how to express that. So they build like neo-Greek temple things. You know, again, it's the first approach you have is kind of being classic because there you show you have money and you understand it and you have culture. So we came in. And the task was to do not a Soviet architecture, not dark, not kind of what they typically would have, but to make something which has a relevance for them, which connects to their history and at the same time being contemporary. But it's not an import of the West. It's not like a, you know, I buy my Zaha Hadid building and be proud of it thing. So that was the real task besides getting it done. Well, we got it done. And that was the building 5.5 months later. The exterior was done by the Uzbekistan architect, so we still have our little temple. We did the interior, and pretty soon we did the whole project management and project organization. Now, to build something like that in that short period of time, you have to pretty much forget everything you know how to build things. You just have to do it. You have to believe in yourself, and you just have to do it. We had 5,000 people on site. We brought in like 1,600 people from Germany. The way we organized it is that we cut the project in 7 parts, giving it to actually general contractors which work in retail because they know to meet a deadline and they know how to improvise. And so we met them, showed them the project. It wasn't even designed at this point. We said, well, give me a rough number, not more than 3 pages. Nobody's going to read it anyway. Next week, we're going to fly there, so you believe it, and then we'll go from there. And that's how we did it. And it was a beautiful experience. Of course, it was 2009. We have global financial crisis. You know, the companies lost contracts in Russia, and so they were in need of new projects. But it was an incredible endeavor to do that, like within this short period of time, because everybody worked together with the local people, with the people coming from competitors from different sites. And of course, doing a project like that at the quality level, we did all the engineering, all the MEP, everything in Germany. You can't rely on things you don't know. So we had to fly in literally everything. Every bucket of sand, literally, because you wouldn't know whether the sand you'll find there, for example, would fit with your components which you're going to mix it to. So you pretty much had to fly in like everything. And which learned us that you can do things if you just want to do them. So there's no project which scares us anymore in terms of time or size. So let's go through that. And the second task, of course, is to create a space which is representative, of course, and they wanted to have features, you know, which are unique and stuff. But we tried to make something which doesn't scare you or makes you small. It's more, and it's difficult to translate in the images. It's really a space where you float, where you're being elevated. It's like you float. And so it's a wide and wide space. Since they had so many dark spaces in their past, the Soviet time, the only formal briefing we got is like as wide as possible. So we're looking at the natural stone, which almost looks like plastic because it's so wide that you don't see any grains anymore. Again, this is a view in the lobby. It's a 3,600 square meter lobby, very high. Again, you have a ceiling which plays with the Uzbekistan ornament. Again, it's an acoustic ceiling. You have the ornaments in the handrails. You'll have it in the floors. So you find a very contextual architecture, and at the same time a very generous, self-confident architecture, very elegant. That's a view into the lobby. You'll see the proportions. Now, again, everything is integrated. The MEP, that's for example the air conditioning, the speakers are being hidden in here, acoustic, everything is integrated. In the length of the space, we'll put things you walk towards, so you have a concave dot at the wall, which is covered with leaf palladium. Just in order to manage the size of these things, we had to put in a big luster in the center. You'll see that here. It's like 26 meters long and 16 meters low and 9 meters wide or something. 1.3 million stones. So that's what they like, like they want to have the things you wouldn't believe. But it's a very ephemeral space, actually. And everything you'll see here, which is white, it's not only white, it's not just a wall. It's a three-dimensional ornament. So you always have something on a detail level, which is here scale, on eye level. And at the same time, when the afternoon sun comes in, the whole wall really dissolves and becomes just a piece of glowing, beautiful depth. There you'll see like this part is like perhaps this size. The upper lobby, wherever your view ends, you would extend the view with mirrors, and the mirrors, of course, again, are patterned with a serial pattern, like here, or like in the facades going up and becoming endless. The auditorium, which sits in the center, is covered with liquid metal, and now you have to imagine we built that thing with 40 degrees temperature outside. And actually, we were done first, and then they closed the facade. So it's pretty much outside temperature inside. So you really have to be very inventive in order to get all these things done in these extreme temperatures. And just think about moving joints, for example. Things within the last 4 days, the air conditioning was put on work, and then you'll chill down the whole building from 40 degrees to 22 degrees within 4 days. So you have like movement in walls for up to 3-4 centimeters, which you have to reckon on once you build it. Quite an exciting thing. You have air conditioning units coming from Mexico, carpets coming from Kathmandu, building material coming from Germany. View from outside. And in the center we have a big auditorium, 2,000 seats. Now the president had the funny idea to make it round, 50-meter diameter and 50-meter height is a cupola. Now acoustically, not the most smartest idea you could have. Actually, when the guy came to us on that Saturday to give us the project, he said, well, it would be a good idea for you to design the auditorium till Tuesday, so we can show that. Actually, that's what's being built. Of course, we worked with the acoustic engineer afterwards for 2 weeks. And given that he only had 2 weeks, it's a beautiful acoustic. We have, you stand on the stage without microphones, and you be understandable on every seat. Now what we did is we split the space. The lower part is being reflective in a Korean elevation. The upper part is like a pantheon-like cupola, which has certain level rings, which are all acoustically absorbing, and the height of the rings are determined by the maximum size of the spatula of the craft person, so they can attach the plaster. And again, the guy does it, and it's dry already because it's 40 degrees outside. And you just can imagine how big the scaffolding would be in that space. 50-meter high, 50-meter diameters, and we had Austrian mountaineers doing all the steel construction in the scaffolding already when the guys upstairs were still doing all their plaster work. That's the view from the stage. And of course you can change color since the building doesn't have like a real purpose, right? It can be for conferences, it can be for concerts, it can be for rallies, whatever, We always said jokingly, this is like the biggest fair stand we ever going to build. And of course we have perfect stage technology, turning stage, all this stuff, TV, whatever you want. There you get the impression it was, of course, a 24/7 site, building all the way around. And the good thing is our client would sit there in a small container 10 hours a day from day 1 till the last day, and whenever you need something, he takes his telephone and solves it. So we ran out of logistics space. You come up, 10 minutes literally 10 minutes later, the mayor of Tashkent was there and blocked the ring road with 2 trucks, and we had 20,000 square meters more of logistics space. That's how you do it. You get spoiled when you do something like that. It's like incredible. And it's really hard to come back to do like a project in a European time thing, you know? It's like, okay. The political part, the other side of the building, you know, you could build a family home in this space, you know. You see a little bit the size of it, big rings again in order to give scale to it there. Again, Swarovski clad it. And the big conference room for all the state conferences with a big, again, 3D wall which helps the acoustic, at the same time creates the backdrop for the photo opportunity. The big banquet hall, president's table connected with a stage with a ceiling of mother of pearl, 2 shells, acoustic absorbing left and right, and underneath another shell of Swarovski stones, crystalliers. And then the back wall is an undulated wall again, which has a block stripe of stucco lustro and Swarovski wallpaper. So when the light hits it, it really dissolves and becomes really like a textile. And again, it helps the acoustic. And the basement. Again, everything is integrated and the lines helping you to navigate through the space. The columns are actually here as we wanted to do them upstairs, but our project manager on the client side was the building minister, who was an architect itself, and we had to give him one thing he could design by himself, so we had some classical columns up there. But here it's how we wanted to do it, actually, you know, getting smaller to the top, ending not visible, stucco lustro covered, and then the light washes down, which makes them really almost ephemeral. And the big rest area. Thank you.
Magnifique. You took us on a fantastic journey. Time was flying by. I prepared a lot of questions. We don't have the time for them anymore, but I could imagine that some people would like to ask something.
Shoot.
Carlo, you're smiling. I think you want to pose a question?
Just very briefly. Thank you for letting me speak in English. Thank you. Hello, it's a great privilege to be in your presence. Thank you for this evening. Not to be forgotten easily. I just wonder if you could tell us how you would personally, in this age where we're finding it very difficult to define our values for the future, could you give some kind of definition to being an architect? Like your prime objective on how you see, whether it's like being a professional or an artist. I just wonder, it's just a very simple request for some kind of guidance on a pathway where the word, even the title, if you could call it architect, is somewhat bewildering now. I'd just love to hear your views. You don't even have to answer if it's private and personal.
Well, I'll give you my answer. And as you might see in our work, we, as much as we don't think in recipes and we don't have a strategy or like a truth or something, you know, which we think applies to everybody. I think it's a very personal thing at the end, what you want to do. For us, is with all the energy we have in our projects and with all the joy and the passion we put in our projects, is the beauty of the profession is that we work with people. And that at the very end, it's about the user, which has to live, work, do something with our environments we're creating. And so we have a very high responsibility. And, coming from that very end, it extends to all other things which are implicated. Of course, working responsible with the resources you have is something which is so self-evident that you don't even have to talk about it. Being respectful to a culture you work in, same thing. That you respect things, but at the same time bring something new to a project, same thing. It all ends for me and that makes a project for me successful. And that has nothing to do about future or past or something. Is it relevant to the people who at the end are being confronted with our design? And has it a relevance beyond the day? And that's what we love, and that's we actually, this is like cliché to say, but a lot of our clients become friends for us. And so we follow our project through for the past 18 years. We know all of them, and we meet them again. And actually the way we do business is not that we do go out for business, but people recommend us quite heavily. That's where we get our clients from. And so we know that people, when a project fails because it was too short-sighted, which happens sometimes, but mostly it has a value to our clients, which goes beyond a short-term sight, and I think that's my guiding line for a good project. And everything else, of course, as architects, we're always part of a society. We reflect society as much as we push society with our work, and I think that's always been the case as designers. And again, that implies a responsibility you have as a designer, because you create environments people need to deal with in some way. So probably it's a very classic answer, which is not like revolutionarily new. It's just...
I don't even know. My name's Peter. I suppose you're Peter.
Yeah.
I'm purely here because I was trapped in a flood in the south of France on October the 3rd. And I didn't know until some weeks later that I was not alone, that over 30,000 people lost their homes.
Yeah.
But the tragic part was the loss of lives, where architects had built the parking in the apartment buildings which couldn't take the intense rainfall, and lives were lost. And do you see any future in architects' work to moderate on the really harsh structure that's gone in the past? Do you think that architecture should, say, for example, support the bombing of places like Syria and say, well, actually it's quite a good idea because we really needed to rebuild anyway? Or do you think that architects should be able to encourage a movement in society to adapt and even embellish old architecture? Is that too much of a question? It's just how you actually moderate on the human element, because you said it's all about people.
Yeah.
Yeah? And like, say, cars, parking, amenities for senior citizens or babies, the whole spectrum of life coming into a label, because ultimately it's just a label architecture, isn't it? To be an architect, it's like a doctor, a lawyer, it's a profession. Do you see there's a future in being able to adapt architecture, or do you think sometimes it's best to destroy the past and start afresh? Thank you.
Well, my heart is to the first, but sometimes the second is the real thing too. I think, I think there is no answer in a general sense. I think there are situations where it's good to leave the past and you start fresh. Mostly in our work, as you might see, we love to deal with what we find, and we'll find a situation how to deal with. And I think that's the beauty of being, I always felt that that's the beauty of being an architect, is that we learned in our profession to bring in a lot of different views and knowledges. So we actually are a moderator of all these things. And I think that change, in our profession, coming from a generation where my teachers were still like godlike guys and figures in black, we're much more of a moderating situation. I think it's about moderation. It's about communication. At the end, in our work, I would consider everything we do, and I only showed the interior part, but everything we do as a studio is communication at the very end. On every level, not only in a brand sense. It's about communication. Everything we do is communication.
Thank you. Another question?
Low budget. How much is low budget?
Which end?
The low end.
The low end. We still do projects which have like a 5,000 euro budget or something. I like that. I mean, of course, you have to balance it on an economically way for a studio, but I think it's very important for you that we open still for these kind of projects. It keeps you alive. I would hate only to do only luxury projects because it spoils you and it becomes boring, and usually, let's say, the client are often enough not the most interesting ones.
Thank you.
What reasons would make you decline the projects?
It's usually only a gut feeling. We love projects when we feel there could be something in for both of us, for the client and for us, where we feel that there is an energy going, that we can do a project together where we both learn something. If that's the case, then it's good. If not, we are more tended to decline it. And then, of course, there are strategic reasons why you would do something. Sometimes you meet a client, you find the person interesting, the project is not, but you'll do the first project because you think there's going to be another project. And again, it's more about you feel something that you... That's actually, why we do not a lot of corporate work, actually. Because we like the situation to have somebody sitting next to me or look at my face and we have a dialogue. If you work corporate, you work with somebody who usually doesn't have an interest in the project itself, and the learning is that a big corporation very often is process-driven. They measure success in the success of the process because everybody in the chain wants to make sure that he didn't do anything wrong and paid his little part of the success, whereas our approach typically is result-driven. So we do everything, whatever it needs to get a good result. And these are two energies which are sometimes a little bit difficult to match. So we're very careful with corporate work.
More questions? If not, thank you very much for your curiosity to share this evening with us. Peter, thank you so much to come by today.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for your generosity. I hope to see you very soon here again in one context or another.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.